Welcome to another episode of CPOV Autographs. I, of course, am Matt, aka Stormageddon. Before we get into the newest episode, I want to thank my Patreon supporters like I do every episode. So big thank you to Rob, Frankie, Emily, Greg, Robert, and Case. I appreciate all of you and everyone else who even doesn't get a shout out but still supports me via Patreon or any of the other places that you can support me. Your kindness and gratitude fills me with an endless amount of love. Anyway, on to this week's episode. I want to talk about my guest, the incredible Lindsay Noel. I don't even know where to start with Lindsay. We've been friends for a long time. We met through the burlesque scene when she was still a performer there. She's now transitioned into this incredible live performer and magician and storyteller. We talk about her magic. We talk about her show that she does with her partner. We talk about doing magic in the pandemic. She is literally one of the coolest people I've ever met, and I'm so happy we're friends, and I'm so happy I finally got her on the podcast. So without further ado, let's get into the episode with the incredible, beautiful, and wonderful Lindsay Noel. I am really excited to have the incredible Lindsay Noel here, magician, badass, beauty from beyond the stars. I'm so glad that you are here. I'm really excited to talk to you because we've known each other through the burlesque scene. I met you when you were performing there, and now within the last 3 years or so, you made this transition to doing magic and doing other live performance. And so I think at the top of the conversation, I would love for you to talk a little bit about the kind of magic you do and what inspired this transition.
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me and thank you for the super lovely introduction. I have always liked you as well. I feel like you've always been a person in the burlesque community that was safe to be around and wonderful to be around and great to work with and just professional and on top of everything, which I love.
Stop it.
And isn't about, it's not a thing I can say about too many people in the burlesque community, honestly.
That's fair.
So
totally
thank
fair.
you for being wonderful. And thanks for having me. So the kind of magic that I do, I would say, I actually just had to answer this question for something that we're working on with the American Repertory Theater. Mm-hmm. And I would say that the kind of magic I do is mind reading and storytelling parlor magic.
Nice.
So
Awesome.
It's sort of a combination of mind reading, which has been really fun to figure out doing through the screen.
Right.
Because it doesn't quite work the same that way.
I imagine, yeah.
And then the storytelling part of the parlor magic, it's a little bit of sleight of hand, a little bit of what you would maybe, I will just say as a trick. But one of my favorite pieces to do, and I kind of do consistently, is a restored thread. It's sometimes called the gypsy thread, which I don't really like.
Right.
I call it the seamstress ritual, which relates back to me for costuming, which is another thing I did before doing magic and still do alongside magic.
Sure.
But I just find that particular piece, I would say I do it closest in style to Eugene Berger as far as my method for the magic nerds listening out there. That's the method I learned from. And I love it. I feel like it's such a wonderful vehicle. It especially works really well virtually because it's something you can do in your hands. It's typically so little and so far away that while it works on stage, I think in the virtual medium, it just translates really beautifully, and it can be a vehicle for so many different kinds of messages, and always really positive ones. And sometimes difficult ones. I feel like it can be used in so many different ways. I've definitely written multiple versions of it at this point. So
That's really cool. Some of my favorite magic performances are the kinds that tell stories. You are actually in a long line of previous magician guests on the show, and I am obsessed with magic. And like I've previously had Matt Holtzclaw and Nelson Lugo, and I told them both as well. I don't want to know how the trick is done. I'm the kind of person who likes to be in awe of magic. Like I recently watched In and of Itself, which is on Hulu now, and So good.
Did you see it live before it was on Hulu?
I didn't get to see it live, which bummed me out.
So I actually haven't watched it yet because I saw it live and it was incredible. It really was a piece of magic that I witnessed and was just, it's so good. So I'm putting off watching it on Hulu, but I'm very excited too because I've heard it's truly exceptional in the way that something different and more, perhaps maybe not more different, and also than the live performance was. So sorry, I totally interrupted. I just got so excited.
No, you're good. Yeah, it's one of those things. Also, is like I like an emotional journey, and a lot of magicians I've seen who've done live shows have done some kind of narrative emotional journey. Like I weeped my way through in and of itself. There are so many moments where I cried, and like. So hearing that you do storytelling with it, of course, makes sense knowing your personality and the storytelling I've seen you do in your other artwork. And so I'm really excited to know actually a little bit more about Adventures Inc., which is what you perform under. You have a partner, and like the idea of creating this way of performing magic, this company to also, put the magic out there, and the kind of adjustments you've made to do it in the pandemic, because like you were saying before, you do some of your tricks behind a screen and it's not quite the same. So talk a little bit about the inspiration for Adventures Inc. and like how you've handled pandemic magic.
So Adventures Inc. was sort of an idea that I feel like we've moved away from. I'm still using it as my handle because you can't fit Lindsay Noel Magic on Twitter as a handle, and I'm like, I haven't found a different name that would also convey that I, Lindsay Noel, am a magician, other than apparently that very basic one. But Adventures Inc. was right when I was leaving burlesque. I was like, I have this idea to do entertainment that could definitely be for all ages, but focused towards inspiring young women and children that maybe wanted to get into magic. And as I got deeper into magic, I realized that actually, no, I do not want to do kids magic. It's a totally different thing. And not that anything that Francis and I do together is inappropriate for children, but it's not. I wouldn't say that it's appropriate either, because the magic I'm doing is mind reading and storytelling, and there's a level of attention span required for that, and I don't think that children have it all the time. There's exceptions, obviously. There's like, those weird and wonderful 9-year-olds that have a conversation like they're 42. I will do magic for those kids, sure. But I think most kids would be like, I don't know, okay. I don't know. It's a totally different energy of performing than I think I do. So Adventures Inc. was sort of that umbrella thing. Also, it would encompass, around the time Francis and I created my partner is Francis Minotti. That's who I keep referencing.
Yes, of course. Sure.
But we created a murder mystery dinner party that was really a surprise party for an actor friend of ours, Jack Cutmore Scott. He was the star of Deception. So his brother was coming into town, and he wanted to throw a surprise party and also play a really elaborate trick on his brother. And so I wrote a murder mystery dinner party based on the reality of people's lives, because his brother would know the guests that were at the party. And so it was a self-working, multi-box murder mystery party that we mailed to their mansion out in Los Angeles. And then it kind of, we weren't there for it. It kind of operated without us, but we were getting text updates throughout the night. Basically, the plot was that it was a Hollywood actor thing. So the plot was that Jack's agent was killing off other early 30-somethings attractive white men who would be stealing Jack's parts, essentially.
Wow.
So as people, and then they would die and find a box with a note in it that was like, here's how you died. I'm so sorry you're dead, but please apply these bruises to your neck or cover yourself in blood and lay here until someone finds you. So it was really, really fun. So Adventures Inc. could encompass that, and we just also recently just made an escape room that could be installed in someone's house to be run remotely. So in a way, I think Adventures Inc. is that stuff, But it's not the magic stuff. The magic stuff, I would say, is just, it's Lindsay Noel magic when I'm doing my solo things. And with Francis, we are a couple of magicians, which was not taken somehow. Like, that handle was just available in every which way. I don't know.
You've got very lucky. That sounds incredible that worked out.
Thanks. So that's, together we're a couple of magicians, and the magic stuff is probably, I would say is under a couple of magicians and Lindsay Noel magic.
And so with Couple of Magicians, now obviously you hinted at it before, you're doing a lot more remote stuff because it's harder to be in person. You know, when we are in person, we're wearing masks and being responsible, like actual adults who care. Of course. But that said, you know, wanting to do magic, I know that there are plenty of magicians who have done stuff on TV that they've had to change for TV because it doesn't work the same as doing it in person. Folks who do close-up magic that then when they're doing it in front of a larger audience have to change it. And so what are some of the difficulties you've run into trying to do magic via screens without necessarily giving up the ghost? But like, what difficulties have you engaged in?
Well, for one thing, it's not satisfying.
Sure. I mean, that makes total sense.
Like, unless, I mean, you know, in this, us video chatting right now, if I do something for you and then we, like, have a moment, that's really beautiful. And that's honestly one of the things that made me want to get into magic was creating those magical moments with people that, you know, while a whole audience is experiencing it, one person is really, it's really for them. Like, oh, gosh, that feeling is so wonderful. And just trying to give that to other people is something. It's something beautiful. It's one of the best things about being a magician. So trying to do that same thing through the screen is really challenging. It's definitely made me adjust how I approach performing because there's no audience to feed off of. That energy has to come from within you. It can't be. You have to make it. So I find I have to have a lot more rituals around performing. Actually, my therapist suggested that. I was like, I'm so sad. Everything is terrible. And there's just, you know, we finish a show and you close the computer and that's it. And you're in your house where you just are always in your house. And she suggested that I should start, you know, finding ways to celebrate when we close the computer. So it's not just closing the computer. It feels like you had a show. You had a show. You're dressed up. You're gonna have so I have a nice drink, not even necessarily alcoholic. You know, sometimes it's just like sparkling cider, or just something to be sort of fancy and wind down and feel good about having done a show because. You just, like everything else in the pandemic, have to make a version of it for yourself in your house. Yeah,
for sure. No, I totally get that. I recently DJ'd. There's a game that came out called Fuser this year, which is a DJ game made by the folks who made Rock Band. And I, on Monday, got to DJ on their Twitch channel. I broadcasted from my channel, but they hosted me on their channels. And, like, I had the same experience. Like, DJing was a lot of fun, and I got that interactiveness with people like typing in chat and making requests and stuff. But then after it was over, like I couldn't go to sleep. Like I had this like come down and I was just kind of wired from this live event feeling. And that's the closest I've gotten to feeling like I'm in a live performance because Twitch has real-time interaction in a way. But I've totally done streams where no one shows up, or I've done events where it's just online. Like, speaking of burlesque, we talked about a little bit earlier, like I have friends who are still performing in the pandemic and I've gone to their shows to support them. And it's not the same for me as an audience member. I adore the art form, but being an audience member on a virtual burlesque show just doesn't work for me. Like I just don't get the energy that I would get in the room.
No, you don't. And also I noticed a lot of, you know, every art form has had to adapt. And because I still have a lot of friends in burlesque, I've watched a good amount of virtual shows, and it's so difficult to do the thing.
Yeah.
Because already it was an interesting trade-off of attention in burlesque, right? And so trying to translate it into the virtual realm, I think it's why so many of them went to OnlyFans. Like I know so many burlesque dancers that aren't doing virtual content for a burlesque show, but they're making stuff on OnlyFans. I mean, I have And clearly, because, the couple of show casting calls I saw for burlesque stuff was like the pay was nothing. And to make these virtual things, even if you're going to do it live, the setup for doing your own thing live in your own house and making it not look like garbage, that time is triple what it used to be.
Yeah, totally.
It's so hard to do dance performance that is based off of a connection through through your phone. Like looking at your phone on a ring light and trying to be sexy is ridiculous.
Yeah, I'd imagine a lot of art form stuff from this. Like I watched Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, which I love, but he's in this white void now recording in his home or somewhere near his home, and there's no audience laughing. And like he's genuinely funny, but I feel like I laugh out loud less because I feel like an audience gets you to laugh more. It's the same idea of like watching a comedy in the theater versus watching it on your couch. Like you're more inclined to laugh, and I like that. I miss that energy of being with other people in a room. It's just wild. I want to talk a little bit about your love of magic, and was this something that you discovered in adulthood, or if you loved magic since you were a kid? And bonus, if you have loved magic since you were a kid, what's the first trick that you remember ever seeing?
Okay, so the love of magic is renewed and new in and of itself. Sorry, not on purpose, but now in adulthood. And actually what did it was meeting Francis in 2014. But I did love magic as a kid, and I loved David Copperfield, very specifically because of the famous touch the screen clock trick.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
That, to me, as a kid, when it was like, touch the screen, I know where you're at, I was like, oh, how does he know? How does he know? It's here on the TV and it's happening. Oh my God, it's amazing. And actually that has inspired, I've made a couple of different versions of touch the screen magic trick because of that. So I have one called the Christmas Witch. I have a Witch of the Woods. I did one, you would love this. Two friends of ours did a proposal over the pandemic, and we made some things for them to have in their house to make magic in their own hands, because it's one of the things that both Francis and I really love to create. But we wrote a whole D&D adventure surprise proposal show.
That's amazing. I love that.
The touch the screen thing was a thing to figure out the orc that was there to help them.
Oh, amazing. That's wonderful.
It was so fun. Putting it together was such a blast. I also I was sort of like a DM character, so I just literally kept changing my hat to be the different characters. So there'd be parts where I had a conversation, I would be just throwing the hats on to be like, I'm this one. But yeah, so that trick definitely was my favorite as a kid. I always thought that was the most amazing thing. And then when I met Francis in 2014, he did his Scrabble trick. We both met at a show that neither of us wanted to do. We both each had separate friends who needed a hand. One person called me and was like, hey, somebody dropped out. The other person called Francis, was like, hey, somebody dropped out. We both showed up to this show, and then he and I hung out until 4 a.m. that night. And then ever since, immediately we started working together. That's how I roped him into doing the burlesque stuff for a while.
Sure.
Just for my company.
Yeah, I feel like that's how a lot of folks who don't do burlesque get roped into burlesque, is usually a favor for a friend, and then it becomes you start working or doing something. It's like a lot of entertainment. I feel like those kind of communities, they pull you in if there's something that interests you, and it usually starts at a level of some kind of friendship, usually helps that kind of stuff flourish. It's funny, I can't remember the first magic trick I ever saw. It was probably something by David Copperfield, it has to be, but the first time I remember magic being able to be something beyond tricks, and it's so cheesy now, but I loved it when I saw it, was when Mind Freak was in New York, Chris Angel. I remember my girlfriend at the time, who still remains a close friend, had seen it, and she was very into the goth scene and very into heavy metal, and so it was catered to her, and so she was like, you guys, you have to see the show, I'm gonna take all of you. And we went several times, Looking back on it, a lot of it is spectacle and really cheesy, but I just remember seeing so many moments and just going, like, regardless of how you feel about Chris Angel now, like, at the time I was just like, you can use music in magic and you can do a magic show that's theatrical. Like, it didn't compute to me. And like now, of course, I've seen so many other shows that do stuff, and I feel like stuff like in and of itself is like the natural evolution of turning that into theatrical stuff. But like, I just remember, and like, I couldn't even tell you, I think maybe the trick I remember the most is he had this like suit that he wore that looked like he was in armor, and he puts it on and walks around it, and then like it falls apart and he's on the other side of the room or whatever. Like, stuff that probably I could figure out that's sort of telegraphed, but at the time I was just blown away. And like, ever since then, every time I've seen any magic, like, my brain maybe for a split second will be like, oh, I wonder if, and then after that I'm like, I don't want to know. Like, I want to live in the awe that magic is real. Because I think that's more fun for me. Knowing how the tricks work that you do, are you still able to enjoy magic now and see tricks that you don't know? Or has it made it more difficult to enjoy magic because you're doing it?
I don't think it's made it more difficult to enjoy it. I think the hardest thing as someone who has come to... Because even when I loved magic as a kid, I wasn't trying to perform it. It wasn't until Francis and I made that Rogue and Gambit act that I had to learn a little bit of stuff. And then I kind of was like, ooh, I do like this. And then once I figured out the mentalism, mind reading part of it, I was like, yes. I can't wait to do this with people. I do spend time trying to figure out how things are done, because now that I'm part of it, I want to be able to be a problem solver that can look at it and go, I can reverse engineer that and figure out how it happened, because I have some knowledge. But I don't have probably quite enough yet to do it all the time. And it doesn't ruin it, though, because when you're watching it, even if you think you know how it's done, I'm practicing, but I'm still not at that level of sleight of hand that I could do something probably, and another magician would be like, wow, amazing.
Right.
I have a couple of things like that, but that's because I'm clever and I figured out some good ways of doing some stuff, along with, being with someone who has a very good understanding of magic and is very good and creative and, consults for other magicians. It's definitely helpful. The other thing that's nice about coming to magic later, I'm not coming in necessarily as a technician. I want to use it as a storytelling vehicle, as a connection vehicle. So I'm not looking at magic going, okay, I have this. What can I do with this thing that exists, this piece of whatever this trick is that is already the thing? What can I do with this? I'm more, let me create a story and a concept, and then I'll figure out the mechanics to it afterwards. So I don't make my pieces based around an effect. I pick my effects or figure out my methods based on what the story is.
That's really interesting. And I wonder how common that is, because I imagine you can craft it either way, right? I'm sure plenty of magicians have a trick that they do really well, and they're like, well, now I need a narrative for it because I want to do this trick. But I think that's really fascinating. And like, knowing the kind of performer you are, that makes sense to me, right? I have to assume that for like back in the day when you were making acts, a lot of it was like, I want to tell this story on stage. Now, how do I tell it? And so I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, thanks. It's it definitely, I think, it's not the more common way. There are people who do it that way, but I definitely have always, I feel like that's true. I've always worked better being like, here's what my story is. Now, how do I make it? How do I fill in to create this? Which I don't think is the way most magicians think about it, according to Francis anyway.
Okay.
He has said that's not the case.
Well, I feel like also nobody does the same thing the same way, right? That's the magic of art. Haha, magic, pun intended. Is that like when you're crafting things, no two people are going to do it the same way. You might get close to doing something similar, but it's sort of like in the same way. No one's ever going to accidentally write the same song that someone's already written. Like the hooks might get into your head, and you may have similar hooks or similar lyrics or like. But it's never going to be identical because a person's own personality crafts and kind of steers what you're making. I'm wondering if have you created any narratives that are based on stuff from your life? Are they more fanciful than that? Have you wanted to create narratives that are true to life, sort of like in it of itself of it all that we've talked about? I'm curious, like where your brain goes when you're trying to craft these stories.
Well, the thing I'm working on right now is the very beginning of something. And it's based on a favorite poem of mine.
Cool.
So sometimes I kind of find inspiration everywhere. It's not necessarily like just from magic or just from movies or anything like that. And so the thing I'm working on right now is based on my favorite poem, but I guess, do I have pieces that I feel like, no, there's not a whole lot. I mean, when I use thread, I do that very personally. But that's more to communicate ideals than stories from my own life. I don't feel like I'm telling personal stories from my own life, not in that in and of itself way. Maybe eventually I'll have a piece that feels that way, but I don't currently.
And so, like, for the example that you're doing something based on a poem that you like, do you often find other media helps get the brain going for creating these kinds of stories? Like, do you pull inspiration from other places in your life artistically?
Oh, yeah, I would say definitely. I think a lot of times from short stories, oftentimes from poems, current events. I feel like I've used, I pull from different medias, but yeah, I don't, now I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I don't know why I haven't done like a very personal piece. I feel like I would enjoy making something like that. Oh, that's not true. I do have one. I'm so sorry. I do have one.
It's okay.
I have one where I talk about the strange things that I used to collect as a kid and how I still collect strange things now. And I'm going to let somebody touch my favorites and then I read their mind with a bubble, based on the weird stuff I used to do as a kid and the weird things that I still do now as an adult.
I was just going to ask, is the weird stuff still happening now? Which I knew the answer to already, but it's still fun to ask.
Actually, it's two different pieces that are like that now that I think about it. That have to do with whatever my weird collection is. Here, I can show you. I'll show you in the room here. But that up there.
Uh-huh.
That, let's see if I can point to it. That, yep.
Uh-huh.
That grid. That's something called 72 Surprise. It's created with that thing that I found at a thrift store before the pandemic. And I found it and it was like $7 and I was like, I don't know what this is for. I think it's for Fabergé eggs. That's my guess. There's like little scoops out of each little spot so you can display an egg maybe. It's very sturdy. You can hang it on a wall. But I was like, I don't know what this is for, but I'm pretty sure it is to make magic with. And so it is now part of a trick, actually, that I do often. I did it most recently for the Magic Castle, virtually, which was exciting. Awesome. I got to still debut with the Magic Castle. Francis and I were scheduled to be there in April of 2020 for a week, and I was really sad to not get to debut at the Magic Castle in 2020. But I kind of did, because they had us virtually for December 26th. And we've been a little quiet. We haven't really done a ton of virtual stuff in January and February.
That's fair. I mean, I first of all, I love the Magic Castle. I've never actually been, but like I've read up on it, and like of course, like Patrick Harris talks about it all the time, and like all the magicians that I've ever met, like Magic Castle is something that's always talked about. So that's really cool. Yeah.
If you're ever out in LA, when this is over, tell me and I'll see if I can get you in. We've been able to get people in the past, and maybe I'll be able to like sneak you in and.
That would be awesome. I would love that.
Go through the secret passageways and stuff.
That sounds really exciting.
It's super neat. There's a couple really cool things. Talk about like creating a space that feels just like magical and outside of reality, and that I really do like the Magic Castle.
That's awesome. Yeah, I like any space that kind of makes you feel some sense of wonder, right? Like even like when I was in Disney World, like I wasn't a giant fan of the Avatar movies, but like in Animal Kingdom, they have a whole Pandora planet, and it's just the coolest thing I've ever seen. Like you feel like you're on the planet. And then we went on the ride, and like where you're riding on the creatures, I can't remember what they're called, and it was just one of the most magical things. There's a moment where you're riding on them and then they stop, and like the seats, like they breathe and you can feel the seat move, and like it's just so magical. Like the things that you can do with imagination, and it's why I've always loved magic and love people who do magic, is you can't do magic for a bitter, cranky person, right? Like, you can try.
No, you can't. You're right.
But for the most part, people will have to want to be involved. They want to have to be a part of it. And you have to have this a little sense of innocence to want to at least engage, even if it's on an analytical level. I'm curious if you have any favorite magicians now, people you look to for inspiration or people that you like to watch.
Well, there's a classic female magician who I saw last time I was at the Magic Castle named Leonard. And she does this half and half act that she is really, it's like her act. She's famous for it. It's amazing. It's like her as a janitor romancing a mop. And it's like the most.
I know this trick, yeah.
It's so good. It's so beautiful. And I saw her do it live and I was just like, oh my God, you just this whole thing. So I really love Tina Leonard. I also really like Harrison Greenbaum. I think he's amazing. I think he's one of those people that is an incredible magician. And also he's just one of the funniest people that I have ever experienced. I jokingly say that Harrison is my curse because over the pandemic, a couple times I did scam, and I would like, my setup would be fine, everything would be fine, and then I would sign on and just have technical difficulties. And I was like, I don't know. Harrison thinks I'm probably an idiot. Or just really incompetent at that. But I've also, the only time I ever messed up one of my weird tricks about mind reading in my collection was when Harrison was in the audience, and I was just like,
oh, no.
So obviously he probably doesn't remember, obviously, is like, I think those things go when you feel like you're like, oh, I look like an idiot. People don't remember it. But I just feel like I have really bad luck for some reason in front of him. But yeah, I think he's amazing. I think he's so good. I think that's part of why I care that I've messed up in front of him.
Sure.
Because I just think he's so talented. I also, and then this is a weird one, he's not super famous or anything, but one of Francis's old friends, Don Camp, is just this incredible storytelling magician, and I could listen to him tell stories and perform his magic forever. I could just sit in a room with him while he smoked a cigar, and I don't even like the smell of cigars, and still just be like, this is great. This is so good. He's so talented. I find him incredibly inspiring. He just has this wonderful way of approaching storytelling magic that it honestly almost makes me tear up when I like think about some of the pieces I've seen him do, which isn't even that much, but he's just so amazing.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's hard to predict sometimes what acts, what magic, what shows will get you emotionally. Like, sometimes I'm very surprised by what I'm watching that affects me. I'm a little curious about what you do outside of magic, especially living in a pandemic. We all need to relax. We all need to decompress. When you're not doing a cover of Big Gun with one of your good friends, Kate Nix, a former guest of this show. I love that music video, by the way, so I just had to shout it out again.
Oh, she did such a good job with it. It was really fun to work on with her. I always get excited because Kate is so good at this virtual realm and this video realm, and I always feel like I just contact her like, oh, can you help? What happened? What am I doing? Because especially like I left Facebook back in January, and I'm probably never gonna go back on it, to be honest.
Me too. I left it. I mean, I'm still on it managing like podcast pages and stuff, so I check in like once a week, but like I don't use it. It's not on my phone.
No, me neither.
No more. Yeah.
No, I haven't, and I'm significantly happier.
Same.
So like I'm gonna say there's a correlation there.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah. So, but I'll contact her and be like, I don't understand why I'm not doing the internet right. Can you help? I'm sorry. I know there's Google, but also you understand this so well, and I just feel like, please help. But So when I am not doing magic, I Well, I try to go outside. I try to go for hikes. I try to, and not that I did very well doing that. We were, over the spring, summer, fall, my parents have a little piece of property up in Pennsylvania near Scranton. And we would go there often because we were just, not to see them, but, and it was a place to be outside and camping and not in Philadelphia. So we went pretty frequently enough that we started building our tiny house up there.
Amazing.
Yeah, we got a really cheap greenhouse kit, and we put that up on. We built a platform so it's off the ground about 6 feet. Lumber got really expensive, so we just kind of cut down some trees because we don't have to beat a code because we're building it in the woods. And we are going to build this spring. We're going to finish it. We're going to build the knee wall beneath it, so to raise it up another 4 feet and be able to put in a propane heater in like a little nook. So that's what we spend a lot of our time doing, actually. That's like the biggest thing, probably, is that.
Yeah, I feel like it's important to find anything we can do that we enjoy. That's not the thing we always do, because otherwise then it's all you do and you burn out. Have you ever felt overwhelmed by trying to put together a show? Have you ever felt like it's just too much?
In the pandemic, yeah. We were doing really well in the beginning. We were streaming once, actually, gosh, when it first started, we were streaming like 4 or 5 times a week. I was doing Magic Storytime, which was really fun. We're working on developing a version of that now that would be not just me reading a story with a little magic trick in the middle. We have some puppets we're working with. Our friend Andrew Stiles is a really good voiceover actor that doesn't do voiceover acting, but he's great with a puppet, and he's really funny, and his improv is fantastic. So we're working on that, adapting Magic Storytime. We were doing Magic Storytime. We were doing Couple Magicians every Saturday night, and we were doing another kind of thing on Sundays, and we just had so much that we were doing. And then, honestly, once George Floyd happened, it felt really stupid to be two white people doing magic when it seemed like there were more important things to worry about. And that we didn't necessarily need to be the focus at that time. But that did definitely, like, after that, coming back, I don't think we didn't start streaming again after that. So once that happened, I focused on doing a couple virtual shows that I put together. But generally, I kind of slowed down on it, also because I wasn't enjoying it all that much. So while I'm practicing my sleight of hand stuff, and I'm practicing various mind reading technique things with Francis and stuff, I haven't worked on putting together a piece other than the Christmas show I did with Martika, and I would totally work with her again. But yeah, we're planning on doing something at the end of April right now. Idea is to get together a show. I realize that I need the external thing of, your show is on this day. Do things for the show on that day. So I'm giving myself that.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm also working on doing some children's book stuff with my best friend, who is a school teacher. And so we're working on a book about masks right now.
Ooh, very cool.
I'm writing and she's drawing.
Oh, awesome. That's excellent. Yeah, I feel like that totally makes sense. I mean, all of that makes sense. And like, at the end of the day, if what you're doing you're not enjoying, then why do it, right? Like, you have to find the avenue to do what you love in a way that works for you. And it's so much harder to do that in the pandemic. We've talked about Francis a lot. And so I want to ask, since the two of you work together so much on magic, have you ever disagreed on a trick or disagreed on how to perform? She's already nodding. Like, do you not always see eye to eye when it comes to magic?
So, okay. It's not that we don't see eye to eye. It's that sometimes I'm very stubborn. Read all the time. I'm very stubborn. And Francis is, I think, a very good communicator a lot of the time, but there's definitely times where he's trying to say something to me and not doing the best job. Mm-hmm. And it's fun. It is really funny. Like, if I'm admitting to it now and talking to you about it now, to be like, yeah, sometimes he tells me that we shouldn't do something and I ignore him or argue with him when he's literally been a professional magician for like 25 years. And I'm like, no, I don't like that. I don't think that's good. I don't want to do it that way. And that's, eventually, usually when I'm being extra ridiculous, I'll come around. But I feel like there's sometimes where there's like a joke that he'll want to put in that I'm like, no, I don't like that. And there's times where he'll have to tell me, I understand you want to tell this story, but right now you're making the wording confused. So one of the things that I find interesting is, especially when you're using magic to tell stories or relate to people, you really have to be careful about your word choices because you're consciously or not affecting the way people are going to interact with whatever your effect is.
Right.
So that's definitely, or just sometimes you have to give people directions and you really have to be very, very clear and very, very deliberate when you do that. Because otherwise they're not going to do it right. And then the thing isn't going to work. And then it's your fault because you're the magician.
Right, of course. I mean, even if, and I've seen this happen, like even if the audience member, the volunteer, or the whatever screws it up, doesn't matter. People are going to be like, nope, magician screwed up, because that's where the focus is on a show like that.
One of the first shows that we did as Couple of Magicians was Christmas in 2018, and in Philadelphia, I should be clear. We'd done a lot of touring. A lot of times we don't perform in Philadelphia, but we were doing a Christmas show in Philadelphia, and an old childhood friend of mine came and was in the audience. Like, I haven't seen this person in a long time, and they are, unfortunately, he's just not bright.
Oh no.
And because I had someone go wrong before and just not follow directions with this thing before, I was really clear, like so clear. And they still did it wrong. And it was after a point where I tell people to throw the book away. Yep. And it was just like, okay, moving on to the next thing because that's not what we're doing now. Goodbye. Get away. And a bunch of my friends were like, oh my God, that guy's the worst. Screw that guy. He's bad. I was like, listen, no, he didn't. They're like, was he trying to was that on purpose? I was like, no, he's just very, very, very stupid. I'm not even mad. I'm mad that I didn't tell Francis, like, just to not. Yeah, it's something where Francis points to the person for me and I don't necessarily pick them because sometimes that's how the setup goes. But, I didn't warn him, like, hey, there's a guy in the front there, don't pick him. He's dumb as a bag of rocks. It will be impossible to do anything. So, sometimes I learned a valuable lesson to scan the audience for any people I know are not going to follow directions beforehand and let Francis know if I think I see them.
Don't pick that person. They're going to screw it up.
Look at their face. See that dull look in their eyes? That's a bad sign. Don't pick that person.
Don't pick that blank slate. Odds are not going to work.
Yep, basically.
Yeah. My limited time hosting on stage, like doing like raffles or interacting with audience members, I would always try and pick people engaged. Because I once picked someone who was just so checked out to try and have a little fun, and they just weren't having it. And it was like I was dying for 3 minutes. I was like, all right, well, won't do that again.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. So actually, the very first show we did together as Couple of Magicians was in Santa Fe at the Jean Cocteau Theater. It was the debut of our Magic of Adulting show, which is like a sexy magic show. I actually do a burlesque number. I make a joke about how strippers never die. You can't kill them. They will always get naked if you give them a reason to.
Sure.
And when we did the show for the first time, the whole audience, the first night of the same, the whole audience is like median age of 65. And I do a piece that maybe you've seen before. I feel like it plays at a burlesque show, but you are asking somebody questions about something, some action they have on a card that you guys could do together. Mm-hmm. It sounds like you're talking about sex. Right. So I was doing that, and I picked someone who looked about my age, maybe a little bit older, but who looked like maybe they would be fun. And so you go through, and I kind of do this thing like as like a flirtatious thing. Francis and I kind of lean into the bisexual thing when we do the magic of adulting. And so I get to the end, and one of the last things I say is so just a question, and, you can take this back at any time, because, consent isn't, like, forever. But is this something that you would, ever do with, like, maybe consider doing with me? And dead face, no smile, just no.
Jeez. Oh, no.
And I was like, oh, what did your cards say? Oh, that's what I wrote down. Hilarious. Okay, that you can... I'm sorry that we went through this. You clearly didn't enjoy it. It's never happened since. Right. And I think in that moment, it was one of the few times where, because, like, it doesn't affect the trick if she says yes or no to that question. It's just a cute thing at the end. So I think it's the one time where the audience member really looked like a dick afterwards. Because, it did not, nope. It was, but that was I can't, I feel like that's one thing that I'm going to have to get used to all over again, is figuring out the formula for picking people. But I also feel like when this is over and we can have a live audience again, people are going to be so excited that they're going to be really good. They'll be real good. They're going to be like, follow directions. They'll be like, look at how great I am. Look at me being outside. Yeah.
I hope you're right. Because I've had this joke on a multitude of my podcasts of, like, this having conversations over video chat or keeping me constantly trained to sort of be a person in person, because I don't know that I'm going to be able to be a full person in person the first time I get to be. Like, I don't know how. Like, we're living in such a weird time that, like, the idea, like, first of all, the idea of going to a convention or being at a large event, like, terrifies me.
Yeah, I don't even just, well, that's the thing. People are like, don't get me wrong, like, as soon as I'm vaccinated and I find out other friends of mine are also vaccinated, I will be figuring out who can come to my house, and everybody's invited. Are you vaccinated? Come over. I'm going to make you coffee. I'm going to make you tea. Please breathe the same air as me. You can touch my stuff. I'll touch my stuff. Oh my God, touching the same things. Like, we'll play a board game because we can touch the same things. Oh my God.
Yeah, I have this weekly Discord call with a bunch of friends within the video game industry, and, like, he always says normalize hugging your homies, because, like, the idea, like I'm a very, like, affectionate person, and so, like, hugging is my love language, and, like, I just, like, I don't know how I'm gonna be a person around other people, like, because of course I'm always conscious of people's preferences and whether they like to be touched, but, like, help you if you like being hugged, because I want to hug people, and it's not even, it's just trying to understand how to be a human again around other people, like, because I'm a physical person. It's just how I've always been within the respected boundaries of those I'm around. But, like, if I can hug you and throw you around, we're going to do it, because I'm so tired of sitting and not being able to, like, I love hugging my spouse. My spouse is my favorite person to hug, but it's not the same as hugging your friends. Like, there are different levels.
I want to hug all of my friends.
Right?
I, like, don't hug people, and it's so hard. I'm definitely a touchy person, and it's so weird. It's also really weird because I'm not a standoffish person. Mm-hmm. And so being in my neighborhood and having to be like, oh, don't come near me, is just so, it feels so bad.
Yeah. It's so weird.
It's not my nature. So it's, I hope I go back to, like, being able to be huggy and touchy, because I really miss being close to people. I miss having people in my house. I miss, like, going outside, being not nervous about people. I miss so much of all of those things.
Yeah. Like, and it's funny because I'm also an indoor kid. Like, I grew up playing video games and staying inside a lot. But, like, I think also my spouse and I got used to just having people over, like, dinner parties, like, and just, like, hanging out and chatting. Like, I've said it to Kate thousands of times, because I've hung out with Kate before at shows and stuff, but I've never actually been able to visit. And I know she moved recently and everything, but, like, I keep talking about how I want to hug her cat so badly. And I'm allergic to cats, but I love Winslow so much. And, like, I'm just like, when we can be in the same space again, with your permission, I would really love to hug your cat, your partner, and you, please. Because, like, it's just not the same. And, you know, she's of course amazing, but like, it's just in general, like I'm the same way. Like I just miss being around my friends in the same space. Like I think it was, when was it? Like the last time I saw my parents was many months ago because I want to make sure they're vaccinated before any of that. My spouse is high risk, but like I just stood in the driveway across from them, like going by their house in Jersey and waving and talking for a bit. And then when we got home, like I got really emotional because that was the closest I had been to them since the pandemic started. It's just our brains are being tested in a way that I don't think any of us were prepared for.
Oh my gosh, no. It's I feel like a constant challenge. It's not, I think the thing is too, it's not getting easier as it goes on longer. It's getting harder because you're like, okay, but I think the other thing for me is that it's really difficult as someone who's like continuously been following the rules and not going out. I'm not going to eat at restaurants. I don't do any of that stuff. My life, every time they change a lockdown or whatever, it literally changes nothing for me. I haven't lived my life differently since we got home from Las Vegas on March 16th or 15th.
Yeah.
We got home the day before it locked down because we had gone out to Vegas for Francis to film the episode of Fool Us.
Right.
We left Philadelphia on March 11th and came back on the 15th, and it was super weird. We were leaving Vegas and they were like closing it down behind us because it was happening. Like the crew, when we were filming, it was like, I remember wearing vintage gloves and just walking around everywhere like this because I was just like, okay, here are my hands. They're not touching me. They're not touching other things. Great. And it literally, there's so many weird pictures of me from that trip just being like I'm literally standing like this with my hands up in vision of my face, but not touching my face. Just being aware that they exist and shouldn't touch things. It was so weird. And I'm just excited for it to, there's going to be, I'm going to start probably like a group chat of people as I find they're getting vaccinated. Be like, get in here. I'll let you know when I'm having parties and you're invited. Can't bring anyone who's not vaccinated, which is weird, and then makes me, I don't know, I have so many there's just so many weird feelings involved in all of this.
Yeah, and I think, and I'm sure this goes for you too, the things that I create and the things that I work on are the things that get me through this, and they're going to be so different from the things I've created before it and the things I created after it.
Yes.
Like, it's just an isolated, this is different, you know. Like you were talking about an event, like I went to PAX East in Boston. It was the last convention that I'd gone to. It was at the end of February. And I just remember, like, coming back from it. My spouse and I stopped somewhere to stock up on essentials. We bought a ton of Purell and a ton of like toilet paper or whatever else. And like, it's just was the last time we didn't think about the pandemic, because after that, it's all we thought about, you know?
It's just literally there. It's just over everything. Like a low-level panic and concern for any action you take, and everything needs all this consideration. And if you're going to see anyone, you are now in a polyamorous relationship with anyone that you're even considering, maybe you might hang out 6 feet apart outside. You got to tell them your whole history.
Yeah, they got to know everything. Yeah.
It's a test in honesty for a lot of people, I think.
For sure. But I think also for me, something that has changed forever is like beyond COVID, which I've thankfully, luckily, knock on wood, never gotten, because we've been extra careful. I've also been the least sick I've ever been in this past year.
Francis and I were just talking about how we like didn't get sick at all because we don't see anybody. So nobody got sick.
And so, like, it has normalized wearing a mask for me. Now, once we go back to quote-unquote normal life, I'm wearing masks at events. I'm wearing masks when I go out. I don't care if it makes other people uncomfortable. Like, I've been the healthiest I've ever been because I did this. Probably the U.S. should have been doing this sooner. Plenty of other countries normalize that. And so, like, that is something that I'm taking out of this that's a positive that will change my life forever, because it'll probably help me stay much healthier.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm definitely not going to... Well, I always had a really good immune system. I'm one of those people that was sort of like, if someone was sick, I'd be like, do you need anything from the store? Like, I'm not nervous about coming near you. I can help. I'm going to be a little different about that now.
Sure.
Probably. And it's also just, I didn't get flu shots before because I don't work around people unless I'm doing a show, right? And then I'm like on stage and not necessarily super close to people. but I think that I will not be that. I mean, I'm going to get flu shots now. I see why there's that thing. It's, it was like a little bit of a wake-up call.
Well, right, because you learn through this experience that's not only about your health anymore. It's about the health of those around you. And it's hard to learn that lesson when you're younger, especially, and you feel invincible. It's different once you hit a certain point, and especially through the pandemic. And like, what I'm curious about is how folks even much younger than us, like my nephews and nieces, how this is going to affect them, because it is unlike anything it's unlike anything we've experienced. But when you're developing and you're that young, like, my friends were my life as a kid. They still are now, but like, you have only so much when you're really young. And so like, also understanding the scope of it, like there are plenty of adults who barely understand it. So like, I can't even imagine what it's like for kids.
The couple of kids that I know, I feel like, well, one's a performer kid, so she's used to just life being weird. But also wonderful and special too. Like, do you know Mackenzie Molotov?
The name sounds familiar.
Her kid
I feel like I probably do.
One of the best kids ever. I love her kid. I love her so much. She's such a special young lady. But she's just always been like, she has her school friends, and I think she sees them for outdoor LARPing. Mm-hmm. They don't do stuff inside. Oh yeah, she's super nerdy, but also super cool and very nice. Like, she's apparently popular, but also make sure she's nice to the other kids. She just turned 7 in November. But yeah, she seems okay. But I feel like and she actually, I think she's old enough. But then my other close friend's kid, I saw them over the summer when we were doing like a socially distant baby shower planning thing. So I would see them in the backyard where we were planning the shower at. And he's 3, and he has a really hard time with the no touching thing.
Sure.
Very difficult.
Because it's so natural, yeah.
Yeah. They're like, he's like, I want to hug you. And you're like, we can't hug. No hugging. Yeah. It feels weird to do to a kid.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. Well, Lindsay, this has been wonderful. I wish we got to hang out more, and you can bet your ass once we can touch people again, we're going to come visit and hang out. I've been wanting to come back to Philly anyway, but like, thank you so much for your time. I deeply meant it when I said you're one of the performers I respected the most and enjoyed the most. And to get to see you continue to grow and perform in a different way, but still see the things that I valued and loved so much in the things you'd done before is so wonderful. I really hope that people check out the stuff that you're working on. Tell the listeners where they can find you on the internet and the stuff that you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much again for having me, and your kind words. It means a lot. It's really nice to hear, and especially right now. So thank you. I have a sneaking suspicion you do a video chat so you can see people get all excited when you say all these nice things about them.
No, that can't be it.
But yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Adventures Inc., all one word with an underscore at the end. Inc is INC. And on Instagram at Lindsay Noel Magic, and that's Lindsay with an E, not an A. Got all these weird smelling things. I did this to myself, I guess. And I'm not personally on Facebook, but you can follow our Couple of Magicians page, where sometimes we post things, and you can find out what we're doing there, which is facebook.com/Couple of Magicians. But yeah, follow me on Twitter and Instagram. It's more fun over there. That's where my cat is. And
yeah, love cat content.
Oh my God. We didn't even get to talk about, I have a second cat. She is perfect. I have 2 cats now. I went 32 years of my life being very, very wrong and telling people I don't like cats. And I was wrong. And I had to eat my words very hard. I was a big anti-cat person. And internet, I'm wrong. I was wrong.
You're wrong. The internet is where cats live. I've learned that over the years, so.
Take some allergy medicine. Come visit when there's less pandemic.
We would love that. That would be amazing. Before I let you go, I'm going to ask you to say our sign-off for the show. It's born out of my old music show that I used to do. That's an indefinite hiatus, which is a kind way of saying it's dead on the vine, but I refuse to admit it's dead. But the saying is, music is life and life is good. It's this idea that as long as we're making art of some kind, even when life is at its worst, it's still okay. It'll be okay. We have this art to keep us going. So if you could say, music is life and life is good to sign us off, we will call it.
I can do that. I can totally do that. All right. Music is life and life is good.
That's it for this episode of CPOV Autographs. Our theme music is by Michael Kill. Our logo was designed by Case Aiken and Joey Mons. If you liked the show, please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. It's a great way to help us reach more listeners. Questions, comments, or guest recommendations? Email mr.matt.storm@gmail.com or hit us up on Twitter at CPOV Autographs. Thank you so much for listening.
Can you believe we've been friends for 7 years?
And it all started because I compared you to Alana the Lioness.
Tamara Pierce really set the tone of our friendship.
A love of magic,
Briar Moss,
fantasy,
Briar Moss,
powerful women, and of course,
Briar Moss. I'm Anna.
And I'm MJ.
And we invite you to join our Circle of Friendship,
where we do a chapter-by-chapter deep dive into the Circle of Magic series by Tamara Pierce.
We answer important questions like, how does Moonstream let certain dedicates take care of children?
Can you imagine anyone else but Mandy Patinkin playing Nico?
Knives, Briar?
And
knives?
Join us every other Monday at cofpodcast.libsyn.com or wherever you download podcasts.
But seriously, knives?
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.